and welcome to Rough Draft, where our guests share perspectives on a topic of interest. I'm your host, Terry Bowers. Tonight's question, where do you want to be buried? Our guests this evening are Chris Juka and Deborah Stahl. Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Terry.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure. Please, I'd like to start with you, Deborah, if you don't mind. Recently, we had the opportunity to discuss a little bit. You've had a death in your family, and can you give us a little background about where they were buried and what led up to where they were buried?
Okay, that was my grandmother, my father's mother, on the Lutheran side of the family. And it was a small town, so the cemetery is pretty much where everybody in the family that was still living there was buried. When she passed, the entire family, she had 11 children, and 3 of them had predeceased her, but they were grandchildren, they were great-grandchildren. I mean, people came in from all over the entire mid-Atlantic and the Midwest. It was almost a family reunion. But we had the funeral and then the interment in the cemetery. She was buried next to her husband. So it's sort of a family plot in that case.
A more traditional
very much
perspective of that. And I do want to get back to that in a moment. If I can ask you, Chris, you have a different kind of perspective. I believe you're in the military?
Yes.
And is it your intention to be buried at Arlington?
I haven't reached a final decision on that. I still regard myself as somewhat remote from that particular eventuality, but I can see some real advantages to that.
And they are?
One is the honor of being buried at that cemetery. That'd be the primary one, and I would feel very honored, and I think it's a great honor for those who have that opportunity. The other is, frankly, financial. I have 4 children and a wife, and I'd like to leave most of my financial resources to them when I pass on.
That's a very, very good point. Thank you. Deborah, going back to that question, have you made a decision where you want to be buried?
Actually, I'm pretty sure at this point I do not want to be buried. As Chris brought up, the expense really mounts up. We lost my mother-in-law last year, and just thousands and thousands of dollars for what is actually a fairly simple and basic funeral. Also, I figure once I pass, I'm not there anymore, so it really doesn't matter to me so much. So I'm perfectly happy to be cremated. And we've discovered this program, and I cannot remember the company who does it. You can be cremated, and then you put your ashes into a container which comes with a tree seed, and you plant it, and you become part of that.
Fascinating. Fascinating.
That really appeals to me.
I can understand why. One of the topics of interest with this, as you say, with the tree and the honor of Arlington Cemetery, is the idea of being with family. Has that been a consideration for either one of you? And start with you, Deborah.
Well, I guess the thing with the tree is that can pretty much go anywhere. It could be, with my family, which, my extended family is really still back in Pennsylvania. So it's kind of portable that way, but it's not a big concern for me. My parents also are pretty pragmatic about it. Once we're gone, we're gone. We figure we will meet elsewhere. So what happens with our remains, we've worked that out as far as organ donation and that sort of thing. But then once it's done, we prefer a simpler final resting, as it were.
It's very interesting. And you mentioned the honor. Is it important to you that your family be able to come visit you, Chris?
Well, yes, it is, and they live in the area, and so that would be very convenient for certainly my children and my wife. Not so much for my other relatives who are dispersed throughout the United States, in Wisconsin, the state of Washington, and Oregon, and Texas.
And we have a lot more to discuss here, and we'll take a short break and return to Rough Draft.
There are many ways of wrapping production cables. Most of them are wrong.
To protect the cable and keep it from tangling, the accepted method in the video industry is the RCA Wrap, commonly known as over-under. This is how you do it. Grab the cable for the length where you want to make your first loop. Bring your hands together. Now gently twist so that the cable forms a natural loop. This is over. After your first loop, reach down, palm of your hand away from your body, grab the next bit of cable, and bring your hands together, looping the cable under. Now reach down again and loop the cable over. Continue to alternate between over and under until your cable is fully coiled. If your cable is wrapped properly, you can uncoil the cable quickly with no loops, kinks, or tangles. It takes practice to master the over-under method, but when you do, you will make your facilities manager very happy.
If you want to learn more about this or other video production techniques, sign up for classes at Montgomery Community Media.
Welcome back to Rough Draft as we consider the question, where we would like to be buried. I'm your host, Terry Bowers, and again my guests with me are Chris Juka and Deborah Stahl. When we left off, we were talking about some pretty different ideas as far as where you would like to be interned. Wanted to ask you, Chris, does it bother you if you're in Arlington Cemetery that you cannot be buried with other members of your family of origin, if you will, as opposed to your military family?
Well, call me an optimist, but I haven't devoted a lot of thought to this particular question yet. I still think that might be off in the future. But it is something that is of concern. But frankly, unless somebody objected, I think many people could accept that, because first of all, they wouldn't. I think my family shares the view that the body wouldn't be me. It's just my remains, and I think they would appreciate not only the honor of the military burial, but also the fact that I could financially help them by not necessarily insisting on symbolism that is unnecessary.
Absolutely. So, and Deborah, as far as with the tree, you said that the tree is somewhat portable.
Before planting, yes.
Before planting. So this is my. so once it sprouts roots, if you will, and becomes necessary to put the tree itself in the ground, do you have any concerns about where that tree might exist in relation to the rest of your family?
I really haven't given that a lot of thought. I guess I'm optimistic too. I haven't thought that far ahead yet. But at the moment, it would be nice to anticipate, someone in my family maybe wanting to have it as part of their property, and if not, then it can join a forest.
Absolutely. Has anyone in either of your families expressed any concerns or needs or wishes as far as where they themselves would be buried?
Okay.
Deborah?
My mother has absolutely said if we have a maudlin funeral, she will come back and haunt us. So she would like to be cremated, and whatever. She has planned. Both of my parents have their wishes all spelled out for us. They've made that known for us. But as far as my mother's concerned, a passing is a passing. But then you celebrate a life, but then the people who have passed,
and so where they are is of less concern as to the fact that they were.
Yeah, that's pretty much how she's always looked at it. So I kind of grew up with that.
And you agree with that philosophy?
I've pretty much taken it on, yeah.
Absolutely. And what about you, Chris?
I'm the oldest in my nuclear family, so my wife and my children are probably even more optimistic than I am, so they haven't given much thought to this at all, if any. Now, my mother has passed on. My father is very practical, so the idea of what to do with his body, what to do with his remains when he's dead has never been voiced by him to me. I remember him speaking to my mother when she was alive, and saying that you could dispose of my body anywhere and he wouldn't really mind. He's very unsentimental in that respect.
And it seems that you have also taken on a very practical perspective of your parents as well. So to sum this up a bit, would either of you feel a greater need now to have a conversation?
It's probably good to discuss these things and visit them with our families, yeah.
Okay, so I want to thank you for sharing their stories, our guests here, and thank you for watching this edition of Rough Draft.